If you think you're too old to become a project manager in IT, that belief is probably holding you back for the wrong reason. Because the role isn't actually about being the youngest person in the room, knowing the most tools, or keeping up with every new technology as fast as possible. What actually matters is how you handle situations when things are unclear, when requirements are incomplete, when timelines are slipping, when people don't agree, and someone still has to decide what happens next. That's the part of the job most people don't see when they look at IT from the outside. So if you've ever looked at IT job descriptions, heard unfamiliar terminology and thought, man, I'm behind, this video is going to show you why that doesn't matter and explain what the role actually demands in practice and why age is often misunderstood in this career. When people ask whether they're too old to become a project manager in IT, they're usually reacting to an image in their head. They picture IT as a space dominated by younger people who seem fluent in tools, system, and terminology that they've never worked with themselves before. And if that's the picture that you're comparing yourself to, it makes sense that you feel behind. But that picture has very little to do with how IT projects actually succeed in the real world. In real IT environments, the problem that slows projects down are rarely technical. Most of the time, things fall apart because decisions are delayed, expectations are not aligned, or people don't have a shared understanding of what's happening and why. Those are not problems that get solved by knowing more technical acronyms. They get solved by judgment, by communication, and the ability to stay steady when things are unclear. This is where age often gets misunderstood. People assume that because IT involves technology, the most valuable people must be the ones who are fastest with the tools or most current on every platform. In reality, the people who are relied on when projects start drifting are usually the ones who have seen enough situations to recognize what actually matters. They know which issues will resolve themselves and which ones won't. They know when waiting for more information helps and when it just creates delay. They know how to communicate a problem early without making everyone panic. Those abilities don't come from being younger. They actually come from experience, from dealing with ambiguity and pressure in real work. And that experience doesn't disappear just because the environment happens to be technical. So if you've managed people, owned outcomes, handled conflict, or made decisions with incomplete information in any professional settings, you already have a base that many entry-level project managers don't. The mistake people make is assuming that experience only counts if it was earned inside IT. But projects don't care where your judgment came from. What matters is that you're able to use that judgment when the project needs it. So when you hear IT project manager and immediately think that's for someone younger, what you're really doing is measuring yourself against the wrong criteria. Because before you decide you're behind, we need to get much clearer about what IT project managers are actually expected to do on the job and where technical knowledge fits into that picture. Because once you understand that, the age question actually starts to work in your favor. On most IT projects, the project manager is not the technical expert. They're not the one configuring the system. They're not the one writing the code. They're not the one troubleshooting servers when something breaks. Their responsibility is to keep the work moving forward when multiple people's systems and priorities are involved. That usually means spending your time in 3 places. Number 1 is decision making. IT projects rarely give you perfect information. Requirements change, systems behave in unexpected ways, teams discover constraints much later on in the project. Stakeholders don't always agree, and in those moments, someone has to decide whether to pause, adjust scope, change sequencing, or escalate a risk. Waiting for complete certainty often makes the situation worse. So a big part of the job is simply recognizing when more information is helpful and when it's just a way to delay making a call to move forward. The second is alignment. So most IT projects involve engineers, managers, vendors, business stakeholders, and who all care about different things. Engineers care about feasibility and stability, business leaders care about timelines and impact, end users care about whether the change disrupts their work. Project manager's job is to make sure those groups are aligned on what's happening, on what's changing, on what the trade-offs are. That means translating information clearly, setting expectations early, and noticing when people think they're aligned but actually aren't. That's not a technical skill, that's a communication and judgment skill. Okay, so number 3, risk management. Risks don't show up as emergencies first. They actually show up as small delays, vague answers from stakeholders or technical teams, dependencies that haven't been confirmed yet, teams that seem overloaded but haven't said it out loud yet. A good project manager notices those signals early on and decides what to do with them. Do you raise it now or do you monitor it? Do you escalate it or resolve it? Or do you just own it? Do you adjust the plan or try to protect it? Those choices are constant and they're rarely written down step by step. This is where experience matters a lot. If you spent time in roles where you've had to manage people, handle conflict, make decisions with imperfect information, this type of work will feel familiar to you, even if the environment itself is new. What's different in IT is the context, not the core responsibility. So when people worry that they don't have enough technical background, they often miss the point. The role isn't testing how much you know, it's testing how you think, how you communicate, how you respond when things don't go according to plan. And those are areas where experience helps rather than hurts. The real question isn't whether you can keep up with technology fast enough, it's whether you can operate calmly and clearly when multiple things are happening at once and someone needs to bring order to the situation. And once you see the role that way, the age question starts to shift, because now it's less about how early you started and more about how you operate when the pressure is on. Now here's the part that stops most people. It's a feeling that IT is this massive technical world, and if you step into it without the right background, you're going to get exposed very quickly. So let's be very precise about this. To be an IT project manager, you do not need to be a technical expert, but you do need to understand what things are at a conceptual level. Remember, you are not being hired to configure systems. You are not being hired to troubleshoot servers. You are not being hired to write code or design systems or networks. You are hired to coordinate the work, understand impact, manage dependencies, and make decisions when trade-offs appear. To do that effectively, you need mental models, not technical depth. Let me explain what that looks like in practice. So let's look at servers, for example. You don't need to know how to build one. You don't need to know how to maintain one. At a conceptual level, a server is simply a physical or cloud-based location where applications and data live and where other systems connect. That understanding is enough for you to ask questions like, hey, what applications depend on this server? What happens if the server goes down? Who needs to be involved before changes are made? Or let's look at databases, for example. You don't need to know how to write complex queries. Conceptually, a database is an organized place where information is stored so it can be accessed and updated later on. Knowing that lets you ask questions about data migration, about backups, about who can access the database, privacy, and access control. Let's look at networks, for example. Conceptually, a network is how systems communicate with each other. Within networks, you have a firewall which controls what's allowed in and out. You have ports, which are specific entry points for connected devices. You have MAC addresses, which are unique identifiers for devices. Once you understand those concepts or those terminology at a conceptual level, conversations will start to make sense to you. And more importantly, you can understand the impact of what the discussion is. And that's the project manager's role. What's important here is that none of this requires you to execute technically. It just requires you to understand relationships, what talks to what breaks if something changes, where risk might show up. Another way to think about this is altitude. Engineers work close to the ground. They need precision. Project managers operate at a higher altitude. You need awareness. If you try to drop down into the engineer's lane, you don't just waste time, you actually weaken your role. And here's something most people don't realize. You can actually build this level of basic IT understanding very quickly. If you spend a few focused days learning basic concepts and terminology, it's enough to follow along in conversations, in project conversations, and ask intelligent questions and understand dependencies. What trips people up isn't the difficulty of the material, it's the language. It's the unfamiliar words that create illusion or complexity. Once that illusion sets in, your confidence starts to drop. And that's where imposter syndrome creeps in. Not because you're incapable, but because you're hearing a new vocabulary and interpreting that discomfort as incompetence. But technical teams don't expect the project manager to be an engineer or to provide the technical solution. They expect you to understand the impact, manage the timelines, surface the risk, keep the work aligned. And in fact, most engineers and technical teams prefer that a project manager doesn't pretend to be technical. They respect PMs who ask clear questions, who admit what they don't know, and keep conversations focused on outcomes instead of jargon. So if your hesitation comes from, I don't know IT well enough, this is the reframe that you need. The bar is not mastery. The bar is simply comprehension. And comprehension is far more achievable than you might think, even if you're starting from scratch. So now the question stops being about whether age is a disadvantage. It becomes a question of whether you're using what you already know and what you already have correctly. Everyone enters a career with a different set of strengths. The mistake people make is trying to compete on the wrong ones. If you're younger, your advantages are usually speed or flexibility. You're more comfortable experimenting. and taking risks. You're less attached to how things should be done, and you're willing to innovate and try new things. But if you're older, trying to compete on that same axis is usually a losing strategy. Your advantage is not speed, it's judgment. And judgment shows up in very different, specific, practical ways on IT projects. For example, let's take decision making. Earlier in a career, people often wait for certainty before they make a decision. They want more data, they want confirmation that they won't be blamed if something goes wrong. With experience, you already know that not everything is always going to be crystal clear. And so instead of waiting indefinitely, you've learned how to make the best decision available with the information that you already have, communicate why you're making it, and adjust when new information appears. Another area where experience shows up is working with people. If you worked long enough, you've dealt with strong personalities, conflicting priorities, faced resistance from people who don't want to work with you, and over time, you stop reacting emotionally to these things, and you learn how to read the room, tell when urgency is real versus artificial, disagree with people without escalating or creating unnecessary conflict or tension. And that matters a lot in IT environments where deadlines are tight and pressure is constant. Now, to be clear, experience can turn into a liability if it becomes inflexible. If curiosity disappears or you assume you already know the answer, that can actually work against you. But experience plus being open to new ideas is very powerful. It means you're steady under pressure and willing to learn. Another way experience helps is through pattern recognition. After you've been through enough or been around enough projects, certain situations stop being new. You recognize when a small delay is actually a warning sign. A stakeholder has disengaged even if they haven't said it yet. A dependency is being ignored and will cause problems later. And you can pick these things up instinctively. You're not guessing. You've seen versions of this before. And that doesn't make you smarter, but it does make you faster at seeing what actually matters. This is why trying to look younger is actually the wrong move for you. The goal isn't to outpace younger candidates on trends or tools. The goal is to operate with clarity, calm, and consistency when things get messy. IT project management doesn't reward who moves the fastest. It rewards who can keep the situation from spiraling out of control when multiple things are happening at once. And that's often the person with more experience, not less. So instead of asking whether age puts you at a disadvantage, the better question is this: are you positioning yourself around judgment, clarity, and decision making, or are you trying to compete on familiarity with tools? That distinction matters a lot. So if you've been carrying around the question, am I too old to become a project manager in IT? I want us to replace it with a better one. Instead, let's ask, how do I position the experience I already have for IT project management? Because age by itself doesn't disqualify you. What holds people back is actually misunderstandings about what the role actually demands. IT project management is not about being the most technical person in the room. It's not about knowing every system or every platform in detail. Definitely not about trying to compete with younger professionals on speed or familiarity with technology. It's simply about being able to think clearly when things are unclear. It's about communicating expectations when different groups want different outcomes. It's about making decisions when there isn't a perfect answer available. And those abilities don't expire. If anything, they actually tend to get stronger over time. If you've done these things in any professional setting, you're not starting from zero. What does need to change is how you think about your transition. Instead of whether you're too late, the more useful question to ask is, do I understand how IT environments work at a conceptual level? Can I translate my existing experience into decision-making, coordination, and risk awareness? Am I positioning myself around judgment and clarity rather than technical execution? Those are questions you can actually act on. Once you understand the role correctly, your fear will start to shift. It stops being, I don't belong here, and it becomes, where do I fit and what do I need to learn to operate effectively in this environment? That's how people move into this role later into their careers, not by erasing their past, but by finally understanding actually how to use it. Hopefully you like this video and this has helped you break your misconceptions or your false beliefs about being too old to become an IT project manager and what's actually required for you to actually successfully break into this career. If nothing else, like and subscribe to this video. And I also host a live PMO where you can step in and operate like a real project manager and gain real IT project management experience, learn all the concepts, the terminology, everything you need to be successful in an IT project management career. I invite you to join and actually gain that experience for yourself just by using the link below. And like I said, if nothing else, I'll see you on the next one.